To News Central Television, and here are the top stories of this hour. 22 dead, scores injured as vehicles collide in Morogoro, Tanzania. South African court orders clampdown of firms over pollution. And in North Africa, Libyan electoral body to conduct elections once deal is reached. I'll bring you the details shortly. For all our viewers across Africa and the rest of the world, this is News Central Now, and I'm Gbenga Aborowa. News Central Now this hour begins with this report. The United States Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, says African states cannot remain neutral on the war in Ukraine. Thomas-Greenfield said that in the General Assembly vote 2 weeks ago to deplore the Russian invasion of Ukraine, 17 African countries, half of the world total, abstained, and another 8 did not vote at all. The ambassador said there can be no neutral ground and that the crisis was not simply a Cold War competition between the West and Russia. He adds that the United States was helping to find alternative sources of commodities which countries import from Russia. The diplomat also said the United States will support South Africa's offer to mediate between Russia and Ukraine. Now, joining us to help unpack this story is award-winning journalist and author, Dr. Mustafa Fetouri. He joins us live from Paris in France.
Thank you for having me, my friend.
Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Fetouri. Now, what's your reaction to the U.S. Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield's statements that Africa cannot afford to be neutral in this conflict?
I think the best position for the entire African continent is to remain neutral, despite what the United States or other superpowers have to say about this, for several reasons. First of all, the Americans, at least for now, they are party to the conflict in the Ukraine, despite the fact that it was Russia who actually broke the international law and norms and invaded Ukraine. But on the other hand, we have to remember the conflict in Ukraine is not actually about Ukraine itself. It's between the NATO forces and NATO countries, the alliance itself, who has been expanding its force to come to the Russian borders. It was not. While we cannot defend the Russian position, it's quite difficult to do so, but it's also quite difficult to understand the narrative of the Western countries and the Western alliance led by the United States in this conflict. It's not about Ukraine. It's about domination of the whole world. It's about American hegemony. It's about a world whereby only America is the superpower and only America is the polar country where it decides the matters of the entire world. So for the Africans, despite the fact that many of the African countries like Libya, Tunisia, Kenya, Ethiopia, South Africa, and you name it, depend so much on the imports of grain from Russia as well as from Ukraine, it is not the kind of war that Africans should be fighting at all, even in politics.
Now, does Africa really have a stake in this conflict, seeing what is happening is far from the continent? Is it just better to sit it out? Like you rightly said in your opening statement, that it was Russia that broke international law by invading Ukraine. So is this not black and white? Is it not so easy to see that the aggressor here is Russia, and therefore African countries should, align with Ukraine?
Well, my friend, however much I would like to agree with that, I really disagree, because it's not really about, as I explained before, it's not about one country invading the other. There are so many other
Layers.
factors that come into play in this kind of situation. Most importantly, as I explained before, that NATO, which is the alliance of the biggest countries in the world, the best armed and the best equipped, has been expanding eastwards. And the Russians have their own security concerns that have to be taken into account. You cannot just ignore, for the Russians, I mean, they cannot just ignore having NATO in their own borders, you know. And so it's not really black and white in this situation, despite the fact that we Africans, despite being even, you know, being far away, we are caught in the middle. But that does not mean we have to side with this side or the other side. Probably it would be much better preferred, you know, if the African Union representative of the entire country or a major country like Nigeria or South Africa could try to play some kind of mediation role between both the Russian Federation as well as NATO. It's not about Ukraine anymore, as I explained earlier.
Now, the United States ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, she says African states cannot remain neutral. I mean, it's almost like an order. Do African states have agency to decide how they want to vote, even if they vote against a certain resolution? And do you think that there might be punitive measures, knowing that a lot of these African states receive donors from international development partners from the West? And could there be perhaps some punitive measures for abstaining and not towing the line of the West?
Well, first of all, we have to agree that the West, and especially the United States, has been using the cheap weapon of sanctions, if you like, against almost anybody who says no to them. That's the first thing. The second thing, why should the Africans, African states or the entire continent, for this matter, be siding with the Americans? Why shouldn't they, or as I explained before, the African Union or some major African country like South Africa and many others, try to mediate the conflict in this situation? The second thing is, I don't really think that the United States will go that far and trying to impose take some punitive measures against any African country because of its position in Ukraine. This has nothing to do with the neutrality the Africans are taking, many of them actually, and the majority of African states, when it came to the UN Security, the United Nations General Assembly, they voted in condemning the Russian aggression. That was enough, I think, more than enough. And I doubt if the Americans will go that far in taking punitive measures against any African countries. It's about hegemony. Again, I have to stress this point. It's nothing to do with Ukraine. Ukraine is a victim, and we are sorry for victimizing Ukraine. We are sorry for the civilians. We have been through war, which was led by NATO in our country, for example, in Libya. And today is the 11th anniversary when the bombing of Libya in 2011 started, led by America and the French.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Mustafa Fetouri, for your insights on the subject. Always nice to talk to you.
Thank you.